Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into the political world of Generation Z. We're looking at a bunch of reports, surveys, trying to get a handle on their trends, biases, what drives their views.
Yeah, the mission is really to understand this landscape. It's fascinating because, the early image, late 2010s maybe, was very progressive.
Right, on social issues, feminism, LGBTQ plus rights, climate, gun control.
Exactly. But more recent stuff, it shows a lot more complexity, internal divides even.
Yeah, it's tough to just stick one label on them. How they answer questions seems to depend a lot on the context and maybe a desire to avoid conflict sometimes.
For sure. And what's really standing out now is this growing polarization, particularly, the split between young men and women.
Okay, so let's start there with their evolving political identity. Remember that 2020 Politico survey? It suggested they lean Democrat.
But fast forward to 2024, and, voter turnout actually dropped quite a bit from 2020.
And who they voted for shifted too. Like, support for Donald Trump among young men went up noticeably.
Yeah, quite a jump from 2020. Young women, though, they mostly stuck with the Democrats. Slightly less support, maybe, but still strongly aligned.
Pew Research from April this year still shows about two-thirds of 18 to 24s leaning Democrat. That's still a third who don't, right?
Exactly. And PRRI around the same time paints an even more fragmented picture, like 31% Democrat, 23% Republican, but then 30% independent. And another chunk saying other or don't know.
Gallup really highlights that independent streak. Over half of Gen Z identifying as independent now. That's more than millennials back in their day. And lots have negative views of both major parties.
Which makes you wonder about their actual ideology, not just party label.
Right. Adults seem more liberal, teens more moderate, and that gender gap.
Okay.
Again, adult women lean more liberal. Fox had an interesting take. Young women more liberal overall, not just Democrat, while young men lean more Republican, but maybe not, like deeply conservative ideologically.
And remember that earlier poll about socialism? Over half of young adults having a positive view. Could be tied to, economic anxiety, student debt, cost of living, maybe some Bernie Sanders influence back then too.
So this gender gap, it seems like a really big deal.
Oh, it's huge. More pronounced than we've seen in older generations. The 2024 election really brought it into focus.
That NBC poll you mentioned, a 21-point difference in Trump approval between young men and women.
Yeah.
And big gaps in just identifying as Dem or Republican, too.
And they even care about different issues. Men focus more on the economy, women more on, say, threats to democracy. Different news sources, too. Women on TikTok, men maybe more YouTube.
What's driving that split? Brookings had some ideas.
Yeah, potentially young women embracing what they term anti-patriarchal values more strongly. Young men's ideology might be more stable, but some researchers point to men feeling more discriminated against.
Maybe a reaction to things like #MeToo or the online manosphere influence.
Could be. Plus, the education gap, women outpacing men in college. Some UK research found Gen Z men were more likely to think efforts for women's equality have, gone too far.
Well, the implications are massive, right? For politics, for dating even, hesitancy across political lines, more echo chambers.
Definitely shaping things. And speaking of echo chambers, social media's role here is undeniable.
It's their main news source, isn't it? YouTube, TikTok, Instagram.
And those gendered preferences pop up again. TikTok for women, YouTube often for men, and nearly 40% get news straight from influencers.
Which brings up algorithms, creating echo chambers, potentially driving polarization. TikTok's speed is incredible.
Yeah, it makes you realize how important algorithmic awareness is, trying to seek out different views. And platforms themselves might have biases, X leaning more right, post-Musk, Instagram maybe more liberal.
And the huge issue, misinformation. Spreads like wildfire, faster than facts sometimes. Algorithms might push what's engaging, not what's true. Media literacy is just crucial.
Totally. Now, shifting a bit, their views on free speech are kind of interesting.
They don't seem to want broad censorship. But quite a few think hate speech shouldn't be protected.
Right, there's this tension. Free speech versus inclusivity. And again, a bit of a gender split, with men maybe prioritizing free speech more often.
The UK data showed strong support for protest, civil disobedience even, like it's a citizen's duty sometimes.
And that TikTok ban opposition in the US, framed partly as a free speech thing for some, might explain why some prefer less restrictive platforms like X, though that has its own challenges with harmful content if you don't have strong critical thinking skills.
Okay, what about this idea of a silent majority?
Well, because getting a clear read is hard. They might tailor answers, avoid judgment. It suggests maybe their views not always loudly expressed.
Especially conservative views, maybe social or cultural ones. particularly among young men,
Correct.
perhaps less voiced in progressive spaces.
Possibly. The increased GOP support among young men in 2024 could hint at that. And when the economy tops the list of concerns for a big chunk of Gen Z voters, it suggests, a certain pragmatism might override social issues for some.
Some research talks about passive appreciation of democracy. They trust institutions, value principles, but aren't super active beyond voting.
So, looking at the big trends, shifting votes, lower turnout recently, more independence, but maybe a more balanced party split now with men's shift. Key priorities: economy, climate, social justice, healthcare, immigration,
Generally more liberal on immigration, yeah.
and globally.
Internationalists, generally.
Hmm.
They think the U.S. should be active, but maybe less interventionist, more diplomacy, less likely to see the U.S. as exceptionally superior, keen on cooperation for climate, human rights.
And all this is shaped by the times they grew up in, right?
Absolutely. 9/11, wars, financial crisis, social media explosion, COVID, Ukraine, Israel-Hamas, just constant turbulence.
Leading to financial insecurity for many, high costs, unstable jobs. That has to shape their politics.
For sure. Pushing concerns about economic policies, social safety nets, and it connects to eroding trust in traditional authorities,
Yeah.
government, media, even big tech. Maybe makes them more open to non-traditional movements. So recapping. Evolving identity, big gender gap, huge social media influence, nuanced views on censorship, maybe a silent contingent, shifting priorities with the economy rising, an internationalist but cautious outlook, and lower trust due to all that instability.
It's a really complex picture, constantly shifting, not easy to pin down at all.
Definitely not. Which leaves us with a final thought for you. Considering all these moving parts, how might Gen Z's evolution change not just elections, but the whole way we talk about politics and how society hangs together? What surprising alliances or new divides could pop up from all this?
Something to think about.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.